many businesses, sold many businesses, and we have a multi-million-pound operation that we run now with our property portfolio and hotels. My world is spent by delegating. I delegate the work out and I let people work for me in a way that they enjoy it and they understand my situation. We make it quite clear, and we employ plenty of dyslexic people within our operation because their thinking is extraordinary. It goes the extra mile.
You are listening to Personal Development Mastery Podcast, where you will find inspirational conversations and actionable takeaways to master yourself and improve your life. I am your host, 𝘁rep𝗸𝗄𝘆, and my mission is to inspire you to grow, stand out, and take action towards a purposeful and fulfilling life. In this podcast, I invite myself inside the minds of successful entrepreneurs, authors, spiritual teachers, thought leaders, people who share their journey, milestones, and failures for you to be inspired to grow. In each episode, you will find actionable takeaways that you can implement right now, so make sure you follow the podcast to get them as soon as they are released. I remind my regular listeners here that for a short while, the podcast will have one episode a week rather than two. Today's episode is about dyslexia. Many of us think of dyslexia as a disadvantage in life, but my guest today goes as far as to call it a superpower. Let's dive right in. In today's show, I am delighted to speak with James Martin. James, you are a pioneer for dyslexics in business. You are a self-made millionaire, having forged your way to success despite the odds and despite being unable to read or write. Like many dyslexics, your school experience was fraught with failure and frustration. But half a century on, you have created a multi-million-pound business empire, and you are now dedicating yourself to helping other dyslexics. You are passionate about creating awareness of the benefits of dyslexic thinking in business, and you actually call dyslexia an unseen superpower. James, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to speak with you today and excited.
Thank you, Aggie. Thank you very much.
James, I will ask you about your story in a minute, but before we go there, let's give the listeners some definitions and some numbers as well. So what is dyslexia and how common is it?
Dyslexia is a digestion of information to the brain. So if you look at the numbers, Aggie, it's something like 10% of the population are perceived as dyslexic in different spectrums of dyslexia as well and severities. What is dyslexia? Dyslexia is a way that the brain receives the information and where it goes in the common areas of the brain. It would go to the right hand hemisphere of the brain, and in most dyslexics it doesn't. It travels through the brain and around the brain to join up and make a fusion of hardwired information. And because of I always use the analogy that it's like having telegraph poles that are too far apart. The dyslexic wires that go between the two, they just don't fuse fast enough or hard enough. So it means that constantly the brain is doing a harder job to understand something. And what that does, it can cause frustrations for digestion of information. And that's sort of a broad outline. Yeah.
Of course, I don't want to spend too much time into the specifics of that because it is a very complicated topic, but to create some context, and I will also, creating some context, I will say that it is extraordinary what you have achieved despite not being able to read or write or your life. So shall we start with your story, and let's go back to your school years. I suppose you were stigmatized as a child, like illiterate, or probably you've been called thick. I suppose these are common in situations. Can you tell me, when did you first discover that you had dyslexia?
I discovered it far too late, or they discovered it far too late. It was probably when I was 12. And you've got to understand that the school curriculum is set up from sort of 4 to 6 to learn to read, and then from 6 onwards to read to learn. So for someone that had never learned to read, I'm playing catch up all the time. So what happened in my case was I ended up being the naughty, disruptive child because I didn't understand what was going on with me. For me not to be bullied and stigmatized by the other peers and classmates, I became the joker. I became the hero, climb the flagpole first, nick a bike out of the bike sheds and ride off home on it, to become a distraction from who and what I couldn't do was stand up in the classroom and read and be like all of the other, or most of the other students, normal. I think that, children at school, they're about impressing each other, and they just want to be part of the herd and be together and be like each other and be liked by one another. And commonly I was pulled out of the normal stream of school classrooms and put into a special needs class that was very humiliating. And I was in with lots of other poor students that didn't know why they were there either. They're either bullies, or they were children that were having problems at home, or they were autistic, or they were dyslexic, or they had all the learning digestion problems moulded into one classroom, and then some poor teacher to try and drum some type of sense into them. It wasn't a happy environment by far, and I ended up being taken eventually with quite a bit of effort from my parents, into the school to be tested. One of the teachers came up, well, it must be something, I've heard about this new thing, dyslexia. So off I went to have a test. My parents were asked to come into the school to the headmaster's office and sat down with me in the middle, little old me sitting there not knowing really what was going on, and they gave us the unfortunate news that your son is scoring high on having dyslexia. All the blank faces in the room. I'm not even sure the headmaster understood exactly what it was, but my parents definitely didn't. And all I really understood, Aggie, was I had now an excuse that if you wanted me to be in a French class, I could put my hand up and say, I'm sorry, but hadn't you heard, I have dyslexia. So what's the point? So at that point, at say 12, I just gave up. I didn't actually bother trying anymore because I had this label. And I was quite, wary from it and worn out by then. And I just went off. And I was a good learner. I learnt lots of stuff, but they were more in a practical aspect. I was living in a pub that my parents ran. I was listening to adults in the corner of the bar talk about their businesses and their trials and tribulations of what they did. And I was picking up most of my digestion from adults at that stage then, and enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. There was something you said that you gave up trying to learn at school when you were 12. Can you tell me when and how did you start overcoming this, mentality of I give up and I can't learn?
It definitely wasn't about I couldn't learn. It was about I didn't want to read or try reading and writing because it was just far too painful. Okay. The effort is the frustration, and the effort was too much. And I didn't see the logical sense in phonics and how the English that we know today comes from like 4 different countries and from an archaic background of how it was collated and put together. Magic E, not necessarily. Silent P, not always. So in my very logical brain, a lot of it was a bit of a farce and a bit of a made-up scenario that you either had to learn all the foibles to understand it, or for my brain, that was just too much of a complicated digestion. So I just stopped. And I went on to learning lots of stuff, but not through reading and writing. So I wanted to learn about custom cars and hot rods and stuff. So I went to a hot rod shop and hung out as in a 12-year-old until they asked me to hold a spanner for them. And then I learned about that. And then I wanted to learn about doing tree cutting. So I went to a place where they cut tree. You know, it was almost as simple and as basic as that. And I enjoyed learning. Most children love learning. But if the mechanism to learning is forced in one direction through reading and writing, then that's crippling the person for their digestion.
Mm-hmm. I will make a quick comment here because you said about the rules and the phonetics of the English language, and I will add to that because English is not my mother language.
No.
But there are many times that it doesn't make any sense why something reads the way that it reads, so you just have to learn it as it is without a logical explanation. But going back to what you were saying, there was something when I was reading your story that made a big impression on me about you dealing with the fact that you were, unable to read and write. You say that you had to find ways to operate in the world, because obviously it's one thing listening to conversations and learning through another way, but there are situations that inevitably you will have to read something in order to, in daily life. So do you want to share this part of the journey?
Most days I would get up and it's just like walking around in a foreign country, because if you wanted to be private and exist, you would read the signs and go to the bank or go to the library or go to wherever you were going to go by reading signs or reading a magazine article about something. So what is forced upon you, and most dyslexics, I'm sure, listening to this will resonate, that you have to, by default, become a people person. You have no choice. You have to ask directions. You have to ask questions. You have to learn how to delegate tasks. And commonly, I created an environment that I could operate in, because I knew in my heart of hearts that I had the same brain cells in there. They just weren't picking up the stuff, how others could do it. And I really understood that from very early, that I wasn't an unintelligent person. I got stuff. Things joined up in my brain, but they joined up through understanding them in a rounded way. So I would understand that if we were going to go to a football match, that it's probably better to take a spare jacket or something, because I'd study the weather. I did weird stuff as a child. It's very strange, but I did cover off bases for me, but they were mainly practical things that I saw. And I see myself doing that now, even in my business world. I will try and futurize the thought process of what I'm going to do and what I'm about. But it was creating an environment to operate in. So very, very quickly, I ended up having people working for me when I was just 17. And by the time I was 18, I probably had about 24 people working directly for me, cutting grass and doing tree work. But it was in my terms, with my environment, with a private secretary reading my mail and answering the phone and taking notes and steering me. And I still, Aggie, do that today. I have Christina that you've spoken to leading up to this podcast with you, and she runs my world for me and makes sure that I'm prepped each day to walk around on this planet and operate in a non-red scenario, for a better word.
And this environment that you said that you have created to operate in, and also how dyslexia affected your entrepreneurial journey. I will come to that in a moment. There was something earlier on when I was asking you about the ways that there are some situations that you can't really change the environment you're in. And what comes to mind, for example, is when you go to a restaurant, you have to read the menu.
Yeah.
There is, it is something that you can't really change that yourself, can you?
I talk about it being focused events. And your listeners understand, today I do not write my own name and address. It's something I will struggle to do. So that's where my severity of dyslexia is, because there's different grades of it, obviously, on the spectrum. I like going out for food and I would enjoy it. Do you ask your girlfriend in front of everybody else or the company you're with to read you the menu at an intimate table at a focused event? It's not acceptable, and it's not something that you want to do every day and be in that situation. So you find yourself having tricks and flicks that you would use, and I would commonly let everybody else order first. I would commonly eat anything because I would just put my finger on something that I thought looked nice, and then I'd end up eating oysters that I've never eaten before, but I got used to it. So there was that, and in the end, you groomed it to you would commonly, even today, I would go in and let everybody order, and when it got round to my turn, I would speak to the waiter and just say to him, how are the team getting on in the kitchen? You've been in and out of there tonight. What looks really good? What's fresh in today? And he would suggest a fish or a cut of beef or something, and then I could make my choice from those two. And usually it was a very good choice. But it allowed me to put the menu down, look interested in their world and what they're doing, and talk about him and big smiley face, and it becomes back, Aggie, to being a social person and a people person, because I'm delegating the reading of the menu to him. And in my businesses and my I've had many businesses, sold many businesses, and we have a multi-million-pound operation that we run now with our property portfolio and hotels. My world is spent by delegating. I delegate the work out and I let people work for me in a way that they enjoy it and they understand my situation, and we make it quite clear. And we employ plenty of dyslexic people within our operation because their thinking is extraordinary. It goes the extra mile.
Keep on meaning to ask you about your entrepreneurial journey, but other questions come into my mind, so we'll get to that. Was there some point that you felt, because there is a certain stigma associated with being dyslexic, maybe not for everyone, but was there a point that you overcame it or went on the other side and didn't mind sharing that or having to say it?
I give an example that when I say I was in my 20s, we probably had about 35 people working for us. I used to do the bankroll. So we'd go and do the wages, and we would go into the local branch, queue up. There was usually the same lady was at the till, and I'd push the checkbook through, and she would fill out the words and the amount. The amount was already filled out, but she'd fill out the words for me and fill out my stub, give me the checkbook back and take the check and give me the money, and I'd go and pay the wages. I don't mind telling people that I can't read and write, but sometimes it just becomes agonisingly too much. In that situation in that bank, the lady wasn't there, there was another person working, big queue in the bank, it was Friday, it was busy, people were queuing behind me. I gave the lady the checkbook and said, could you just fill it out? And she pushed the checkbook back through the window and said, no, you have to do that. And I said, by gently pushing it back, well, actually, I can't. Could you do it for me? And she just span around on her seat and looked into the back office where all the other clerks and bank people were working, and launched into, I have a customer here that can't read and can't fill out the check. Are we allowed to do that? I'm not too sure what we're meant to do. Aggie, by the time she turned back, I'd gone. I'd left the bank. It was my local bank, and I was a young man with this sort of small business around me, and the humiliation from it was just too much on that particular day, and I left. And I say I'm dyslexic James out in the open now. That's who I am, and that's how I operate. And I think that more in today's world, more people have to be open about their abilities. And I do see it as a superpower. I do see it as an advantage. And I want to promote that to other dyslexics to start thinking in that way. Because the minute I saw it as the advantage was the minute that I started getting back the usage of it. I had to change the inner voice in my head to start seeing it in a positive outlook, as opposed to seeing it as a disability. And while you're talking in your own head that it is a disability, it will always be a disability. You need to change your inner voice of how you approach the situation.
Let's talk about this then, the superpower, as you say, and the advantages. Can you be a bit more specific? You already said that you had to hone your social skills and become a people person as a result of that. What other advantages or superpower? Because it's a strong word to use. So can you elaborate on that?
I think the reason I can be as provocative to say that it is a superpower. If you look at famous dyslexics, they're a pretty smart bunch, and they're right up there from Steve Jobs to Richard Branson to all these different characters that are saying that they've been sort of moulded by their dyslexic power, and the power is that when that question or that problem comes into your brain, it goes around the whole of the brain looking for a fuse. Now, if it was something that you were just reading or doing, it will go to the reading area that is hardwired to receive that information. But because you're seeing your information's coming into your head, Aggie, it's going round at the emotional side of your brain, logical side, what I call future-proofing, what an idea might look like in the future, but be careful what decision you make now. So the dyslexic brain has reach because every time it has a problem to solve, it's like a brand new set of fusions. So because it's brand new, then they're becoming creative. And it's the creative side of the dyslexic brain that is the advantage, because it's allowing you to see and not be crowded by existing thoughts, existing fusions in the brain, existing standards that have already been fused in the brain and already been set down. It commonly will look at everything new. So when we say doctors talk about we only use 10% of our brain, I think the dyslexics use much more because they work so much harder to come up with ideas and solve problems and digest information, because it does a small Olympic route round the brain before it comes up with an answer.
Mm-hmm. We were saying before we started the recording, you were saying that you believe that dyslexia has shaped you into the entrepreneur and the person that you are today. And I was making some notes. You talked about the creative side that dyslexia has given you and the problem solving, apart from the social skills, being a people person. And I think in my mind, listening to these things, they are certainly skills that an entrepreneur needs to have, or rather needs to be good at, actually. Problem solving, social skills, creativity. You can't really go far in entrepreneurship without that.
Yeah, I think that you go to that route because it's somewhere where you can create your own environment. Because when I left school, I couldn't even become the delivery van driver because I couldn't read the addresses. I could drive the van okay, but it's no good unless you can read those addresses and stuff. So you create an atmosphere and an environment that you can work in. So commonly that's self-employment, or it might be manual work, or it might be art or something or music or something else that you can do that doesn't involve you having those focused events where you're put on the spot to be able to be conforming to the normal standard of reading and writing. And I think that is the real key to it. I'm shaped by, do you know, Aggie, I talk about me being shaped by dyslexia, and I think the real truth of it is, if I had done okay at school, I'd probably have a great okay job now, But because I felt I had something to prove, and I knew that there was more in me than that, and I was stigmatized and sort of, bruised a bit. By the time I left school, I felt a bit beaten up by it all. It wasn't the greatest experience. So I wanted to prove, and my insecurity because of those younger days have made me constantly not want to look a fool. And I talk about this when I do some lectures and stuff now to students, that wanting to succeed, wanting to prove to the world or to your mum, whoever you want to prove it to, but you feel that there's something you want to prove, and that's kind of lived with me. Even today, when we've had a massive team meeting here today, and we've been constantly talking about us looking and being perceived correctly in any of the businesses that we run, and that is, not everybody gets there. When I talk about failure, Aggie, I failed every day at school. So when you talk about failure to me, yes, and you talk about someone that's not done lots of failing, they probably won't start a business, purely on the point that they will have a failure against them and they won't want it. They don't know how it feels. What's it taste like? What's the stigma? What will people say about me? For me, failure is fab. I love it because it means I'm learning, not going to make that mistake again, learning, and in the end, obviously we're keeping the failing down now to a minimum, but my teams that work with me now, my staff, are encouraged to fail. They're encouraged to have an atmosphere where they can make mistakes. We have tough love at work, but we're also encouraged to try something. Otherwise, we're just going to be the same people in the same business, like the same business up the road, and that's not how it works. The future is driven by new ideas and people with the opportunity to make a difference, and that is actually the entrepreneurial spirit, and I promote that, even though they are employees of mine. They're heads of departments, be it our head gardener that runs a team of 5, or our estate manager that runs a team of 6. They are mini entrepreneurs within their departments.
Mm-hmm. About failure, you were saying, it reminded me of that saying that failure is only if you don't get the lesson and you repeat doing the mistake. Otherwise, it's not failure at all. And I think that's how we as human beings learn, also by failing and not repeating the mistake. James, well, there is certainly a topic that I want to discuss with you. So I will have to switch gears a little bit abruptly now, and it is the education system. And because you are very passionate now with everything that you've been through and understood about yourself and dyslexia, you're very passionate about raising awareness, first of all, about dyslexia, and also helping people who are dyslexic to realize that they're not disadvantaged, or instead of that they have advantage. So Sal, I wanted to ask you about education, because obviously it's a big topic.
Yes.
What do you think needs to change in the education system to accommodate for this different model of learning that a dyslexic requires? And I think that question might also be useful for someone listening that knows some dyslexic, or maybe a child.
I think, Aggie, we haven't got that long, so we don't get me started on education. It is archaic when you look at what's going on with education. It hasn't really changed that much. There's been some big changes in private education because there's money there. In the state education, I go into schools now, and I have young people reach out to me that have had some terrible situations just recently. So it's far from moved forward from when I was at school. It's different, but it's not that much better, in my humble opinion. I'm sure some teachers will tell me otherwise, and I'm sure there are some great teachers that are tackling it. There needs to be more sensory learning, that the senses of being outside and learning in nature it's not just for the dyslexic person or the autistic person or the ADHD person that has a different digestion of learning. It actually helps all of the students in that classroom to learn in a way that is brought to them with colour, with pictures, words, noise. So it has a full spectrum. We need sticky learning. Just because there's a digestion, it doesn't mean it sticks. We need it where it's digestibly sticky. And that means that if we've got a kid there that's interested in football, let's find out how big a football pitch is, and let's cut it in half, then cut it in quarters, and find out how many shirts there are. And if there was shirts, do we need spare shirts? So how many shirts would we need in the wash and spare? So you can do a whole maths lesson on the football pitch. And if we've got girls that like ballet, then we can talk about ballet shoes and dresses, and we can talk about how many people in a company of ballet dancers. So there's lots of different ways. It takes time. It takes people being bothered to do it that way and to create an atmosphere that is storytelling, digestion that's sticky, and we need sticky learning, and that comes from effort and the change of policy. We're getting into government serious stuff here, but something needs to change, because what they're doing at state schools at the moment, those jobs don't exist that they're actually grooming the students for. AI is coming to eat all the jobs anyway, so something needs to change, but it needs to change pretty quick, because if I've got a 10-year-old Edward, my own son, who's quite severely ADHD, and he's being taught in a way now that is very different than I was. But I'm paying for that education, and very lucky we are to be able to do that. But that isn't the case for many thousands and thousands of children. And the worry of their parents is that, what can they do to add value to that? Well, they can talk to dyslexic groups. They can talk to me. They can find their local dyslexic association to help the situation. But learning in the round. I'm not a great advocate for smaller classrooms, Aggie. I think that sort of one-to-one and stuff. Children like to learn with their friends and their colleagues and peers. So, classrooms can still be of 20, 23 strong. There's quite a bit to studies have shown that the herd move together better. But someone that's great at reading can be buddied up with someone that's not as fast as a dyslexic with them, but they can learn off of each other. And it's an organic way of doing it that feels wishy-washy, but it's not. It's actually has a lot more memory and I use the word stickiness with it. When you look at the system, it looks like a factory at school, and they're scoring you at the end of the month, and they're scoring you at the end of the year. Well, you might not have digested that information as quick as the person next to you. And we need some level of scoring somewhere, but the pressure that children get put under at the moment isn't something that I advocate at all. It's just too much at the minute, from what I can see. And I'm holding my hands up here. I'm not a doctor or a teacher. I'm someone that's just been through the system myself. I've got children from 36 to 10 years old, and 5 of them. So I've watched the system happen from private and state education, and there are big changes need to be made. Children love learning. They just need to have the right environment to do that.
I think there are few people listening to this that they would disagree that the education system is flawed as it is. You use the word archaic. It is indeed. It's like 19th century if it's not from ancient times. I wanted to ask you also about your book. You're writing a book. Do you want to tell me your reasons for writing it, and who is it for?
We're hopefully getting it out in September. The idea of me doing that was to, the audience for that book, Aggie, was really the parents of dyslexic children, to help them have a calmer and more navigated way to helping their children be rounded people to come out the other end with prospects. Parents that they are worried fearful, they've given this thing to their child, they're embarrassed. There's lots of emotions that those parents go through. I remember it with my own parents. So it's for parents, it's for young dyslexics, it's for anybody listening that is interested in dyslexia. But there are lots of books out there, Aggie, but they're mainly talking about the diagnostic of the brain with the machine that told us it was this side of the brain, the dendrites, the nodes. I'm not a doctor, and I don't perceive to learn all of the knowledge of the brain. But what I do know is the experience of it and how to work within the framework and how to use it to your advantage. And I talk about some goofy stories of me, going through my business world of where we've got to today, how we operate today, what school was like for me, and some tricks and flicks and some insight to, calming the whole dyslexic. The way we even diagnose dyslexics, you're not allowed to have a diagnostic test for dyslexia till you're 7. It's ridiculous. Why would you do that? There are telltale signs at 3 and 4. So the sooner you pick it up, the sooner you can make it better or help the child with what they need to do. They just pile on homework onto children that are slower. That doesn't necessarily do anything. All it does is just frustrate the child and make them work at home with their parents that are already frustrated. So I give an insight to how to calm the situation down and become the dyslexic adults that they are going to be in a more relaxed and less pressured way. The more pressure we put on people and students, the less they learn. I think that's a good way of looking at it, yeah.
Thank you for this answer. And tell me, to someone listening to this, James, who is or knows someone with dyslexia, and if you could just offer one piece of advice, what would you tell him or her?
If you're a dyslexic, hopefully you've resonated with some stuff I've said and you understand it from there's lots of people that write about dyslexic and comment about it. There's nothing like having the real experience explained to you from a real set of scenarios. So that's one thing. I think that learn how to love yourself, Aggie. Learn to love yourself as the dyslexic person you are. Be the dyslexic person. Come out, for a better word. We talk about inclusion. We talk about, where we should be with making everybody accessible to jobs, etc. You need dyslexic people and autistic people and disruptors in your businesses. So, become one of those people that can go in and help industry and commerce become the next thing, because it's something I passionately believe with, that there's a big space for the dyslexic thinker with this rounded 360 approach and this diverse way of looking at stuff. Aggie, I talked about the fad of reading and writing. This didn't come to
ask you about that as well, James.
Yeah, sorry, I'm preempting it, but the fad of it, because it's important, because it what is happening? It's the late 18th century that it started becoming this factory format that everybody had to do the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and that's what was drilled into everybody. And if you couldn't pick up on that, you were thrown on the scrap heap. Well, if we go back in time, who used to run the villages and hunters and gatherers and the social gangs back in the day? Well, they were probably dyslexic people that could understand weather, they could understand the seasons, they could understand animals' patterns of what they did, so they could go and find them to kill them again each year. They could understand berries and growths on trees, and they had a more holistic and rounded approach to seeing where they could help the tribe exist. And if you see that moving forward now, that's happened with more inventive thinking from all different people in industry now. I operate reading and writing quite comfortably every day. admittedly, I do have a PA that runs my life, but outside of her, I have my phone that has technology in it. It texts to read, reads the text. I can operate. AI is coming, Aggie, and there's no getting away from it. And the more we accept that if it's coming that quick, I think 2050, will you need to read and write to exist in this world? Not necessarily. Will it be a priority to drum into students their times table in that fashion that we've already done? Not really. There's a calculator in every phone. Do we need to be able to read and write these excruciatingly painful essays? Not necessarily. You can just dictate them into a machine and it will just write them up for you, proofread it and send them to whoever needs to listen to it. It's more about the content of what you're thinking and working on, as opposed to whether you can actually physically read it or write it down. And I think that's what's more important. And it's a controversial statement, but think how long this planet's been rolling around, going round and round in circles. There wasn't reading way back in the time, and it's only very, very recently it's been with us. And it's caused a community of people quite a lot of pain.
There is no doubt that technology and AI are taking over and changing very much the way that we absorb information and accumulate information. What was controversial about what I was reading that you said, and you repeated it now, that by 2050 no one will probably need to read or write. I think you had said something like it may just be for recreation as an activity. For me, even though I can understand how this might happen, I would still argue, for someone like myself, for example, I'm a very visual person and I really need to read. I find it very difficult to learn by listening to something. If you tell me something, and you'll probably see me doing it all the time now that we're having this conversation, I write things down because I need to process them in such a way. So that was what I found, that yes, maybe, and hopefully the technology will help incorporate all these elements and allow people that don't operate in such a way and that they don't reading and writing. But calling it a fad, that for me is the controversial thing. I mean, I personally, I think of myself, if you would take away reading and writing for me, I don't think I would be able to learn anymore. So that is my point of view, which is probably the opposite.
But I think, Aggie, that if you listen to what you've just described there, that you take continuous notes as you go along, I take my notes exactly the same as you, but they're all stored in my head. I have a fabulous memory because it's groomed from not being able to take those notes down. So I can remember board meetings from 15 years ago, and I know that it was a 3.5% split, and that's what we agreed, because I can run that video back in my head, and I am sharp as a razor because I have my evolution of my brain power has worked to cater for that in that format. Aggie, I've put that statement out there as a controversial speaking point. That's what the thing is about. A recreation sport for reading paperback books, I think I said. And I think that is, for some people, it just pricks them enough to have a conversation. And I think that's why I've released that. And that's why I talk about it in the book. But it is something that we will, smoking was a bit of a fad, but we found that it was very harmful to your body, so that's coming to an end. Alcohol is probably coming to an end, another poison. I'm not aligning reading and writing with that, but I'm just saying that it's from my position where I am on the side of the fence where it doesn't help my world. In fact, it actually hinders my world. I can move much faster in a more modern technical world where technology helps me move. I disregarded reading in the end because it was too painful. I watch people now that read super slowly and they trance through stuff. And I was listening to an interview with Steven Spielberg. He goes over scripts word by word. It's agonizingly painful, but he does it because he digests it better that way. He understands the content better that way, but it doesn't make it easier for him. It's just made it harder for him, but he's found an advantage in doing it that way. And Aggie, if I was stuck on a desert island and I needed to start up the generator and there was a handbook, guess what? I would start reading the handbook. It might take me a week, but I would definitely read the handbook and get the generator started. So, we talk about how we cruise through life, and I listen to audio. But I do two audio books a week and have done for 15 odd years. I'm a big digester of information. It's very different when someone's reading it to you because you're getting their inflection on what how they see it. So it's kind of going in a different way. You read something off the page and you put your spin on it and you put your take on how it is and that how it resonates with you in your brain, how it goes in. So I do understand your commentary on it, and to the listeners here today, it was meant to cause conversation. So I hope it does.
Exactly, and that's why I mentioned it, because it, if not anything else, it is food for thought for someone to maybe see some different perspective on the way that they learn, regardless of whether they are dyslexic or not. And you said something about Steven Spielberg and being this, you used the word agonizing on reading word for word, and you made me wonder whether I have created this model of learning for myself. Possibly I have, and it's not like my brain was necessarily wired like that. So it's also interesting for me to process and think and ponder about that. So thank you for the controversy. It's always good to have this kind of interesting topics. And James, this is a fascinating conversation, and I realize I'm very much aware of our time together. So I wanted to ask you also some quick fire questions to wrap things up. And you were saying that you have listened to my podcasts before, so you will know very well that the first one I asked is...
I've listened to many, so I'm getting ready now. I'm getting ready. Here they come. This is your style. Come on.
Tell me, personal development, what does it mean for you?
Everything. It's it has changed my world from perhaps the last 24 years since I could get it on an iPad to start listening to other people that had gone before me. It means everything to me. I love it. And it has changed me from a struggling human being to someone that had destiny and knew exactly what they wanted and how to get it. Thank you for asking me that. That's a great question, Aggie. Thank you.
Thank you. And what's one book or resource or audio book that really made an impact on your journey in personal development?
Do you know, one of the first books that I really digested and listened to probably 12 to 15 times was The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. And I've gone on to listen to the rest of his work. He's a lovely author. He's very... Well, I suggest all of his works to listeners that are listening to this. He's a great author. He's very thorough with his research. I like Brian Tracy. He's great. Very American, but he is superb. It's upbeat. It's comical. His message is fantastic, and I've got all of his works. And if I want a refresher in my world, I'll go back and get Brian Tracy out, goal setting, and go through it again. And the more we listen and read books, the more we take more stuff from them because we listen to them in a different way.
I was privileged to speak with Brian Tracy for my podcast. So this it was about self-discipline. So it is the book. I will also second that. It's very to the point, and it really makes the point very, very clearly. One more hypothetical question, James. If you could go back in time and meet your 18 or 17-year-old, what's one piece of advice you would give him?
Don't doubt yourself. You know, there was a time at that age, I suppose, Aggie, where I doubted. You know, I had all these dreams and aspirations. Was I really going to be that person? Was I, you know, am I really this person? You are what you say you are. So don't doubt yourself ever. You know, and from young people, take that message. You know, this is from an old 60-year-old guy here. Never doubt yourself. You can do anything. Just talk better to yourself. Make sure that inner voice is saying the right things to you and not holding you back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. James, obviously this we can't exhaust the topic in a short podcast conversation, but is there anything that I've missed, something that you were really hoping that I would ask you and we completely skipped it?
I think the one thing that I really advocate for I would like to say that while we have the airtime then, that what is dyslexia? What is ADHD? What is dyspraxia? What is all these? It's just digestion. It's just how the brain digests information. And scientists have gone out there and labelled these certain movements in the brain as this or that. Mm-hmm. I think it's all just how we digest stuff and how we make our brain pick up on the information and the surroundings. When we learn to walk, no one teaches us to walk. We learn to walk. And we learn to walk because we keep trying and we keep trying. And sometimes the education system doesn't allow that person to try in a different way because they're hurrying them along to the next exam. And that's, you know, that I'm very passionate about that. And I'm very passionate, again, to have the opportunity with you. And I've loved your stuff that you do with other people as well. You're a great host for these podcasts because you get into the questions. Your platform has made a lot of difference to a lot of people, and it has to me. I've enjoyed it immensely. So there, I wanted to say that. So let's do that on air because it's the truth, and the truth rules.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much, James. Okay. Where do you want to direct people who listen to this and they want to find out more about you?
If you come to, you can find me on LinkedIn, Dyslexic James, or you can find me on dyslexicsjames.com.
Thank you.
Okay.
James, it's been a truly fascinating conversation. I enjoyed it, and there were some elements that you also allowed me to think some things about my own learning style or digestion of information, as you said. Okay. So I very much enjoyed it, and I hope that the listener also found value in what we discussed. I want to wish you all the very best with increasing the awareness about dyslexia and helping people who are dyslexic to realize that it's not a disability that they have, it's just something that they can convert it into a superpower. So all the very best with that. Last parting words from you?
Aggie, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today as well, and please continue. I enjoy your stuff big time, so thank you very much. I'm honoured. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed listening and that you got a huge amount of value from today's episode. If you have, please share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to know more about me and what I do, visit my website 𝘁rep𝗸𝗄𝘆𝗀.com. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,